Chapter 10 The Forbidden Mountains. But the next day at school, Dawn's eyes fell on a mostly empty classroom. She gasped. Mr. Blankenship sat at his desk, but there was no sign of Leah or any of the other kids. They weren't in the hall either. "Good morning, Dawn," he said. "Go ahead and take your seat." "But where is everybody?" Dawn asked. At first, she was elated. No sign of Leah. But then that quickly morphed into worry. But before Mr. Blankenship could answer, the bell sounded. As if on cue, Philippa rushed in, red-faced and gushing apologies. "Samson ran away into the woods," she huffed and puffed. "I had to go fetch him." "Always Samson, huh?" Mr. Blankenship said. "Bless that pup's heart." Philippa saw the empty classroom. Why isn't anybody else here?" "They're still out sick," Mr. Blankenship said. "What's wrong with them?" Philippa asked, exchanging worried looks with Dawn. "Well, we're not sure," Mr. Blankenship said. "It's kind of a mystery." "What do you mean?" Dawn asked, swallowing hard. "Apparently, they can't stay awake," Mr. Blankenship said. "Guess they've been sleeping since we sent them home yesterday." "Sleeping?" Dawn repeated. He nodded. "Yes, the nurse suspected it's a virus making them tired. Most likely, they'll feel better soon, but I'll keep you posted." "Thanks, Mr. Blankenship," Philippa said. Then she caught Dawn's eye. "Wow, I'm glad I skipped the party. That's so strange. I wonder what happened." Yeah," Dawn said, feeling sick to her stomach. Nervously, she began to remember her deal with the fairy about the spinning wheel. As Mr. Blankenship began teaching, Dawn did her best to focus on the positive things happening, like the possibility of her getting to go home and the spinning wheel saving her aunt's shop. Still, she had a bad feeling, and she couldn't seem to shake it. "Wow, it really does look like a castle," Dawn said, peering up at Philippa's house as she stepped off her bike. Her aunts had granted her the whole afternoon off to go over to Philippa's house. Dawn took in the house, located on the edge of town by the forest. The Forbidden Mountains loomed over it, casting the place into shadow. Dawn thought Philippa had been making a joke when she said it looked like a castle, but it actually resembled the castles from Mr. Blankenship's history lesson. It was made out of gray stone and even had a mini moat encircling it with a drawbridge and 2 towers. "How big is it?" Dawn asked. "It's humongous, but it's drafty and gets cold in the winter," Philippa said. "My bedroom is in that tower." Philippa pointed to the tallest one, a spire that steepled up to the sky. It had arched stained glass windows that depicted a prince riding a white horse, brandishing a broadsword. Rose vines climbed up the stone tower, blooming their crimson blossoms, but Dawn could see the thorns jabbing out like needles underneath the leaves. "Whoa," Dawn said in awe. "So you're like the real princess around here." "At your service," Philippa said with a bow. "Or maybe more like a prince. I don't like dresses very much." She pointed to her dusty coveralls and boots. They both laughed. "How'd you get a castle for a house?" Dawn said. "I didn't know they had them here." "Oh, my great-grandfather built it when my ancestors came over from England. In fact, they founded the whole town. That's also why it's named Castletown," Dawn finished. "That makes total sense. Woof, woof!" A giant white dog barked and charged toward them. The huge ball of fluff barreled into Philippa, almost knocking her over in his desperation to lick her face. "Down, boy," Philippa giggled between licks. Dawn guessed there were horses smaller than the dog. He had a fluffy white coat and an adorable face. "So, this is the famous Samson," Dawn quipped. "Eater of homework, escaper into the woods, licker of faces." Yep, the one and only, Philippa said with a snort. He's a great Pyrenees. They're bred to protect sheep, but mostly he eats and sleeps. Ha! He looks harmless, Dawn said. But apparently, if you're a fraction, watch out. Samson barked in agreement. Say hi to my friend, Philippa said, petting his fluffy head. That's Dawn. Woof! Samson barked and trotted over. Dawn worried that he'd knock her over with licks too, but instead he sat like a good boy and held out his paw. Hi there, Dawn said, reaching out and shaking the dog's paw. Pleased to meet you. Hey, I'll race you, Philippa said. With that, they mounted their bikes and took off toward the woods. Samson chased after them. They skirted the edge of the forest. A cold wind stirred up and hit Dawn's face. The leaves rattled like dry rain. Philippa skidded to a halt. Dawn joined her. Beat ya, Philippa said. Well, my bike is like older than both our ages combined, Dawn said with an eye roll. Truth, Philippa agreed. Dawn peered into the thick woods. The mountains rose over them, looking purple in the fading afternoon sunlight. Their snow-capped peaks glistened like diamonds. Why do I get such a bad feeling about that forest? Dawn asked, as another gust of wind billowed out and shook the trees. Philippa followed her gaze. Well, you always gotta be careful out there. That's why we stay on the edge of the forest. We don't venture in there much, even for hunting season. Really? Dawn said. What are you afraid of? The usual suspects, Philippa said. Wild animals like bears and feral pigs. I know pigs don't sound scary, but they're super dangerous. Deadly, even. But there's more. More than killer pigs? Dawn asked. She tried to picture a killer pig, but all she could think of was a goofy pink animal like Wilbur from Charlotte's Web. Philippa hesitated. Just some stupid stories about the forest and the Forbidden Mountains, she said. Forbidden Mountains? Dawn asked, swallowing hard. Why do they call them that? Why do you think? Philippa said. 'Cause they do look kind of forbidden, don't they? They have snow on their peaks year-round, even in the summer. That's strange, Dawn asked. Is that all? Well, there have always been rumors of magic that hides in the forest, Philippa said, but I think they're just spooky stories made up to scare kids and keep them out of the woods so they don't run off and encounter killer pigs or other dangerous creatures. Like Samson? Dawn said, patting his head. Exactly, Philippa laughed. Boo! She jumped at Dawn, who leapt back in fear. Then they both broke into peals of laughter. Despite the eerie feeling she got from the forest, Dawn was starting to feel at ease. Hey, I should get home for dinner, Philippa said. They'd been biking around the forest for the last few hours. See you tomorrow? Yep, bright and early, Dawn said, turning her bike around toward her aunt's cottage. It lay a short ride away on the other side of the forest. The wind whipped up again, blowing down from the snowy mountains and hitting her. It was frigid and froze Dawn to the bones. Dawn shivered and pedaled faster. Black clouds began to swirl overhead. Lightning flashed, followed by a sharp clap of thunder that shook the ground. This storm seemed to come out of nowhere. Dawn had a bad feeling. She skirted the woods, staying out of reach of the trees. More lightning flashed and thunder boomed. Rain started pelting her and making it hard to see. Then, suddenly, caw, caw! A swarm of ravens burst from the trees and flew at her. Dawn ducked down and tried to avoid them, but her bike wobbled. One raven dive-bombed her, barely missing her head. Was it the one from the shed? Then over the cacophony of raven cries, another sound reached her ears. It was a hideous cackle. It sounded just like the dark fairy. The storm kicked up even more, almost blowing Dawn off the bike. The lead raven circled back, took aim, and flew at her again. But this time its trajectory was dead on. "No!" Dawn screamed, trying to pedal away. She raised her hands to protect her face, but the raven dove at her, a familiar, menacing voice echoing out of its beak. "Poor, simple fool!"